I am doing my second live today. I feel very nervous for this one for some reason. I wanted to talk about holding space without force. Holding space for somebody else, but this can also apply to oneself. So I'll give a little bit of background about it first. I tweeted one time that I get the feeling that most people have never had space held for them that is not at least subtly forceful. So here's what I mean by that. When I say force, that can refer to something very subtle. It's basically like allowing what's in us to exist, even when that's uncomfortable or inconvenient or not what we associate with who we are. And needing the things in us to move in a certain direction. So I'll explain that a little more. And I'll talk about it in the context of an energy session, which is where I'm doing this most often, although any relational context it would apply. So when I'm working with somebody's energy, let's say we find a particular energy or emotion in a particular part of their body, there is so often a very default response. It's coming from a well-intentioned place of moving that in a certain direction or making a certain thing happen with that energy or emotion or image or feeling, whatever we're finding. Even in healing contexts, even in bodywork, therapy, etc., there can be this real push and this real force around healing something or alchemizing it or releasing a limited belief or releasing tension or opening up a blockage, anything like that. So what I mean by doing it without force is letting go of an attachment to any of those things happening. Of course, it's great when those things do happen, but it's sort of a surrendering to the mysteriousness and complexity of somebody's process and the fact that things are going to happen on their own time in their own way, according to some intelligence that is much vaster than any one practitioner. So my sense is that most people have not had this experience. And the reason I feel that way is because of the way that so many people's systems respond to me when I approach them that way. Let's say that there's a very scared child part that comes up in a session. And me and the person that I'm working with approach that child part without needing anything from it. We approach it with curiosity and care and an attitude of, I'm here to listen to you if you want to express something, if you want to share something with us, if you want to be known better. But you don't need to do any of that. We're just going to be here. There's even a move that I learned from a teacher of mine. It's like you don't even have to stare at it directly. Sometimes our stuff doesn't want to be stared at. It's like you can kind of just avert your eyes a little bit. There's an image that I like that is my client sitting on a park bench, or their inner child part that I was just describing, sitting on a park bench. And I'm just sitting on the park bench next to them. Not even looking at them. We're just facing the same direction, staring ahead, silently. And I'm here. If you want to talk to me, I'm here. I'm listening. I'm all ears. And anything that you have to say is okay. And you don't have to talk. And when I approach people this way and approach their energies and emotions and parts, whatever language you want to use, when I approach those parts of people in that way, I often get this kind of responsiveness of like novelty. of like, I've never been treated this way. I've never been seen and not pushed in a certain direction. And I've had that sense of a reaction enough times now that it makes me think, wow, most people's really tender hidden parts have never been approached without force. There's something I want to say about how the force is not even verbal. It can be, but there's a layer or many layers below the verbal layer. So here's what I mean by that. Let's say you're having a conversation with somebody and they express a desire for something that they want to happen. It's something really simple. This is a silly, mundane example, but like, what if they say, let's go to the movies. I want to go to the movies tonight. You can agree with that idea or disagree, say I want to go or I don't want to go, but there's something that happens before that where with your body, your energy, your way of being, you're either allowing their desire to exist in the space between you, in the relational space, or you're rejecting it. And that happens before any words are spoken. It's very subtle and it's very physical. And it takes a certain amount of openness to be able to let, even if it's something you disagree with, even if it's something you don't want, to allow that desire or energy or whatever to exist without pushing it away or rejecting it or turning away from it with your energy. So because that happens at a different layer than the words, that means that the words and the embodiment of it can be different. This is one of the reasons that energy work is so important to me, is because there's so much gaslighting that happens in the difference between the energetic layer and the verbal layer, where the thing that people saying is happening is not what's actually happening. And whole realities can be constructed around something that's not actually what's happening at the energetic layer. So there's a thing that can happen where you can say that you are accepting a part of somebody, let's say a really tender energy or emotion or child part in somebody, but your body is not actually accepting its existence. And this is where going deep in your own process is so important. There's an expression that's something like, you can only meet somebody else as deeply as you've met yourself. And I think that principle, the idea there, is very important to what I'm talking about. Because if you haven't met something without force in yourself and allowed it to exist, not necessarily followed it, not necessarily acted on that particular impulse, or done any particular action. Oh, I think I dropped out. So not necessarily acting on that energy or doing a particular thing with it, but making space for it to exist and breathe. If you have not done that in yourself with a particular energy, you're not really going to be able to do it with somebody else when that same energy is coming up for them. So that means learning how to be with yourself non-forcefully, your own existence. So there's something that I do in energy sessions. This is why I think that one of the main things I'm actually doing in an energy session is just giving somebody my presence. There's tools and there's words and there's ways of relating verbally that are important and that I've been developing, but it's mainly a presence and capacity thing. And when I show somebody that way of relating to themselves without force, there's a teaching and a transmission there of that way of being that they can then bring into their relationship with themselves, which is also going to affect the way that they're able to hold space for people in their lives without pushing in a certain direction. This is so important because there are so many things in us that are hard to make space for. There are so many feelings, thoughts, energies, emotions that are really inconvenient, uncomfortable, painful, embarrassing, make us think we're a bad person for experiencing them or for thinking them or feeling them. So those are the hardest ones to hold space for and allow to breathe without just really naturally, instinctually pushing into a corner, trying to make them go away or trying to make them immediately shift into something else or heal. So there are times in energy sessions where we're not doing much talking. Yeah, a good example of this is actually like if somebody comes in with a lot of trauma or a certain type of trauma, we might need to start very slowly. And there might not be that much talking at the beginning, and it might be them getting accustomed to my presence, getting accustomed to somebody, to opening up to somebody in any capacity. And a lot of that, I would basically just be in a meditative presence in that session. And I've seen that do really interesting, powerful things. No words being spoken and me not trying to do any particular thing. It's interesting and it's counterintuitive, and it's very difficult as a healer to come into a session with that kind of attitude of like letting go of something needing to heal or something big needing to happen in this session or whatever. So there's a thing that I'm doing in my awareness, not the entire time, but in that kind of, in certain situations of just meeting them and holding space with my energy and my presence. Not even really engaging with thoughts that come up and images. Just letting everything breathe and exist. And it can be so interesting how much can move and shift in somebody's being. It's like the capacity that I add to the system, because I have a big capacity because I've been working at this for a long time. The capacity plus the lack of force. The feeling that's coming up for me now as I talk about it is something I see in people a lot, is parts of their system just getting to breathe for the first time. And a lot of interesting stuff happens when all of that new breath is there. But I'm not doing it to try to make that happen. Making Meaning Project asked, is somatic suppleness, non-resistance, key to the holding of space then? I'm not sure what you mean by somatic suppleness. Feel free to add more detail if you want. Non-resistance, key to the holding of space then. I guess I would say yes and no. I think that the resistance and non-resistance thing can also turn into a forceful thing. An example is that people will feel resistance to having a feeling, to sharing something, to being seen in some kind of way. And then they'll think they're not supposed to feel resistance. And so then they'll get in this gridlock of feeling resistance and trying to let go of the resistance and being stuck there. So the same principle of non-force applies to the existence of resistance. If all of your feelings get to be felt and exist and breathe, then resistance also gets to be felt and exist and breathe. And respected. Not trying to pry anybody's body open, not trying to pry anybody's energy open, not trying to rush intimacy between me and a client or between me and somebody in my life. Can let that stuff happen naturally. So yeah, I think I would say it doesn't feel so much about resistance and non-resistance as about not bringing force to whatever's there. That feels pretty complete for me, I think, what I want to say on that subject right now. If anybody else has other questions or thoughts, feel free to drop them in the comments. Thanks for your question, Making Meaning Project. And maybe there's one last thing I'll share, which is a visual that's been coming up for me around this topic. And I think I'll probably try to draw it later and put the drawing on Instagram. If you imagine this space, a relational space, hi Maddie, a space of you and a friend, you and a partner, for example. You're talking about something, important to you, something potentially tender. And one of you expresses something tender and vulnerable. Okay, imagine somebody is sitting next to me and I'm talking to them and they express something vulnerable. It's kind of like, their expression, is it able to flow like this past me? Or does it hit a wall here before I have responded to it? Am I allowing myself to be touched by the fact that that just happened? By the fact that that energy or expression or desire exists? Or am I walling off? So the interesting thing is that I could allow that energy to exist, could allow it to flow, and still respond verbally. I can hold a boundary, say I don't want to do that thing, say I don't appreciate you saying that, while still being in the energy of allowing it to exist. So that's really what I'm trying to get at, is this subtler, more energetic, more physical layer of allowing and spaciousness. Yeah. Okay, cool. I think I'm going to end it there. Thank you guys for joining.